Hi everybody, and welcome back to another session this week talking about portfolio careers. My name's Anthony. I'm an ST3 GP trainee and chair of the RCGP's AIT community. This series has been created to answer some of those all-important questions that many of us start to build up towards the end of our training and just after CCT. We're going to be hearing from a range of different GPs from a wide range of different backgrounds, sharing their top tips and experiences to help set you up for a successful transition into your first 5 roles. Today, we're joined by another superstar from the world of general practice, Dr. Ian Wood. Ian is a portfolio GP, and alongside his clinical work, he's also a clinical director at EMIS, who many of us might use as our electronic patient record. He's also a clinical lead at Big Health, who owns apps like Sleepio that many of us, myself included, have used for many of my patients. And he's also, and perhaps most importantly for today, he's the chair of the First5 committee at the college. So representing all of the First5s working around the UK. Hi Ian, thanks for joining us.
Hi Anthony, thank you for having me today.
So we're going to talk about portfolio careers, and you have quite a big portfolio of different roles, and alongside your working life you've also got a young family as well. I guess my first question is, how do you manage it all? How do you manage your time at the minute?
Yeah, maybe that's a better question to ask my partner, but no, it's having a portfolio career for me. It enables me to satisfy and enjoy lots of different elements of healthcare, both individual patient level up to the population that we serve with EMIS, as you just mentioned, but also gives me a little bit of flexibility around time with my family, which with a very young family is really what you need to have. So this way of working really suits me, and it suits a lot of the First5s as well. I think it's a big demand for it at our stage.
Yeah, and I think when people talk about portfolio careers, it can kind of mean lots of different things to different people. If you were to describe what a portfolio career is, what would you say to anyone that asks?
Yeah, so for me, a portfolio GP career, and popping a GP word in there, is someone whose primary role and vocation is that of operating in general practice, but alongside their 1, 2, 3, 4 days a week in general practice, they're supplementing that with just another interest, and that could be anything from education to research, academia, or into the digital technology space that I sit in. There really is, I don't think there's any restrictions on what it includes, as long as it has some degree of a nod or a slant towards what you do in your primary role as a GP.
And was having a portfolio career always something that you envisioned when you were training, or did it come after you CCT'd? What was kind of the process for you of thinking about that as an option?
Yeah, so for me, it was an interesting journey. I knew I always wanted to do something alongside the bigger picture in health, and finding ways to impact populations more than just the individual stuff in front of me, which, not to take away from, is still the most rewarding part of my week. But I knew I always wanted to do something which had a wider impact to healthcare. Hopefully across a bigger state, which it does now. I never knew what sort of form that would take. I've always loved technology from a very young age. I've always had that as something I just enjoyed rather than something I necessarily wanted to do with work. I've never trained in coding or in that sense, but just loved using it. And when the opportunities came around for me to look at some roles involving that, it kind of just materialized into this great set of jobs that I've got now, which satisfy all that need for me. But the big one is around impacting sort of population level health.
Okay, and in terms of when you kind of mentioned looking for those opportunities. Were you kind of actively seeking things, or were they kind of just came out of the blue, like more serendipitous things? You often hear kind of people when they're talking about how their own career evolved. There was lots of was a bit of luck, was looking for the right opportunities at the right time, but often not necessarily a clear trajectory of where they wanted to end up or which roles they were specifically looking for.
Yeah, a really good question. I think there's two things there. You always said serendipity, and there's a big part of that to getting the roles that I am now. But I suppose a big nod goes towards having sort of mentors or people to help guide you to where you go. I had a fantastic trainer during my training, during my GP training, that is, who sought out opportunities for me, encouraged me to have opportunities, gave me a space to grow those opportunities. And I think you really need that. You really do need a good mentor. And we're seeing more and more opportunities now for First5 GPs to get either formal or informal mentors, and that played a big part for me. And then also it's just being in the right place at the right time, and with both the EMIS roles, especially the big health. So one of the big pilot for Thames Valley, in Thames Valley around Sleepio, gave me an opportunity to do some work for them for free, and just fell in love with it. They work in the insomnia space, poor sleep space, improving mental health. I've always been fascinated with sleep. Again, it's something which I just enjoyed doing, and I wasn't really interested in it becoming a named role, but it fell into that because of the work we were doing together. So there's the serendipity part, is playing alongside that earlier part of the mentoring, and my trainer was involved in that and pushed me towards that as well. So they're the two big things for me, certainly.
And you obviously mentioned always having an interest in technology and that kind of space. So I guess it was part driven by passions as well as part driven by opportunities as and when they arose. And I guess that's something that lots of people will be starting to think about, is where their passion lies beyond necessarily just the consulting room. So as you said, some people might be interested in research and academia, some people might be interested in teaching and training. I guess now that you you could start doing this during training, but I guess particularly over the coming months, as people get settled into salaried or long-term locum roles or whatever it might be, they'll be starting to think about those other things that they can fit in as well. Is there anything kind of else that you've discovered post CCT that you've kind of been interested in, or are there any opportunities that you've have enabled you to kind of think about what other opportunities are out there?
No, it's a really, really, really good question. Let's pick up on a few points there. I suppose the training time is a challenging time. You've got your exam to focus on, you've got portfolio to work on, and you're also often in a time of transition in personal lives as well, finding houses, partners, and the like. So you never got much time in training, but it is a space or an opportunity that you have to explore new avenues once you've got all those sort of important hurdles, if you like, out of the way. And during my training time is where I had the opportunity to develop some of those skill sets, certainly in the digital space and with Sleepio as well. And I think I really encourage any trainee who's starting to get some interest, once they've done those core essentials you have to do in your GP training, because just try and find ways or reach out to people to try and guide them towards opportunities to grow those interests. Because actually when you start doing your salary roles, your partner roles, your locum roles, it's yet another whirlwind which takes a bit of time to settle down. Those first few weeks and months can be a little bit unsettling actually when you start as a First5 GP, and having to add in then searching for other opportunities, other careers, it can be really challenging. I suppose I was quite fortunate that I wasn't disillusioned with medicine. I still love general practice, and I still harbour dreams of that going back to doing that entirely full time at some point in my career. I never needed to leave, and I never felt like I was at a point of crisis and I needed to get away from clinical work. For some people, I guess it would be very difficult, where actually if they decided they don't want to do clinical work, they come out of training and they're left having to find an opportunity rather than falling into one. And that can be really tough, actually. The opportunities are not abundant. It's a niche set of skills that we have as clinicians, skills which are hugely translatable, in terms of managing risk. Managing risk in patients, for me, far outstrips the burden of managing risk at a corporate responsibility. I'm sure the companies I work for may not want to hear that, but it does. I'm much more comfortable managing corporate risk than I am patient risk. Negotiations, communications, all those skill sets which we learn and make the core of general practice training. They're hugely translatable, but there's not an abundance of jobs. And I think that's a really tough, if you're in a position where you had to make that change, because you weren't happy in clinical work. And that's why doing it in training, I suppose, it gives you that a little bit more freedom and flexibility whilst you still got the income coming on as well. I guess that also ties into that when you are looking for your opportunities, it's just so important to find something that you're interested in and make it so you're interested in. I know that's obvious to say, but I was very happy doing the work I was doing for free. I was never at any point asking for income for it, and it fell into that. I think if you try to fashion engineer a role which your mind wasn't in love with, then I think it would end up falling by the wayside. So finding something that you're sure you're interested in, find that space first, and then let the opportunities kind of come out from root level there, then kind of trying to go the other way in.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to frame it. Is actually most people who find themselves in a portfolio career do seem to be doing something which is they're passionate about, and which kind of works in unison and synergy with their clinical role. And they often feel that people feel that it makes them a better clinician as well, because it might bring in a chance for them to develop a new skill set which can be applied in the consulting room as well as in whatever role it is. So I think that's probably a good place to start, is not just looking for an additional role because it's there, but looking for passions and exploring things which you were able to develop an interest in during training, and then being able to take that to a next step. And I also think...
And what's your experience like, Anthony? Because also you've got a bit of a portfolio trainee role, if you like, in many ways. What's your experience on balancing that in with training?
I mean, I think training has been, for me, a really good opportunity to explore lots of different opportunities. And I think because training, particularly as a GP, is quite a protected space, people value you having experiences outside of just your clinical training that isn't necessarily seen as important in other specialties. I think I've always been incredibly well supported to do lots of different things during training, whether that's taking the year out to do my fellowship, doing my AIT chair role, doing like a person-centered care fellow role at the college as well. There's been lots of stuff I've been able to do because I was in GP training, and my trainers and program directors were always very very supportive of that. And I think it's made me, again, I think like when I took a year out to do a fellowship, it wasn't because I was disillusioned with medicine in any way. I still really enjoyed being a GP. It was what I really wanted to do, and is going to always be an important part of what I do. But similarly to what you said, I think the skills that we have, and particularly as a GP, the position that we have within communities, mean that we're in a good position to be able to influence kind of the wider system as well, and understand how that fits together in a kind of holistic way. And so I think being able to take some of the passion that I have for healthcare, but being able to utilize those skills in a different way, is something that's equally important to me for my long-term career aspirations. And I think I've been able to discover that through GP training.
So it sounds like you and I both had fantastic, if you like, testing ground or opportunity to sort of breed relationships. Do you hear from any of your trainees that that's the norm? My understanding is that most trainees seem very well supported to do so. Do you hear from many people who don't find that they've got that same level of to explore other avenues?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues with GP training is that there is a lot of variability, and some places it is more difficult to be supported to take on these opportunities. But equally, I think sometimes, for me as a trainee that's been based in London the whole time, there are a lot of opportunities here that don't necessarily exist in certain other areas. There are many areas of the countries that have lots of opportunities, but in certain areas there are less of them, or there seems to be less access to them as well, which I think is a bit of an issue, and something that hopefully will start to improve, not just for trainees, but also post-CCT with the introduction and widening scope of the post-CCT fellowships. I think that's a really good initiative to try and open up opportunities and access for people who might not necessarily have thought too much about these roles before, or didn't think it was something which they would be able to access, but now is going to be made open to a much wider pool of GPs. And I think being supported through that transition is an incredibly important time. There's no denying that going from a trainee to a kind of independently practicing GP is a hurdle and a jump which takes a bit of time to adjust to. So being able to be supported through that is really important. And I hope that lots of people will be able to benefit from that program over the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think, one thing that from doing lots of roles during training has occasionally been a bit of a struggle is kind of just time management and balancing things. From your perspective now, post-CCT and managing lots of different roles, like we say, alongside having a young family, do you have any kind of tips for that, or things that you've learned along the way to try and improve that balance? People often talk about like work-life balance. Is that something which you've managed to crack, or not yet?
Yes and no at times. Yes, at times no. And COVID certainly puts a further strain on that, didn't it? But yeah, it's probably the biggest hurdle. And the biggest tip for anyone who's looking at this kind of career is balancing the opportunities that come your way and your appetite alongside your own time and space, and more importantly probably those that you share your time and space with, because on paper we might do 5-6 days of work a week, but in reality I end up giving a lot more than that, and I've got a very supportive partner that can facilitate it. Managing that alongside young children has been tough, certainly. But we've just, we've made sure that we've stayed open in our dialogues around and how we can make it work out, and when things have become too much. And I've in recent months I've found ways in which I need to push back, and realizing that overcommitting to certain opportunities is to the detriment of both the people I'm committing to, but also to myself and my family. So there's definitely a balance to be had there. The last thing you want to be doing is overcommitting and under-delivering, which is probably a direct contrast to what my advice to people is when they're starting out and think they want to nurture some of these kind of careers is to don't be afraid just to say yes to an opportunity. You might not understand initially where it's going to lead. Lots of people have 5-year, 10-year goals about where they want their careers to be at certain points, but actually just saying yes to something you're interested in with not much of a current oversight of where it's going to lead to, don't be afraid to do that. These roles really do seem to flow out, and I'm sure if you spoke to Nikki Canali and like in ancient England, I'm sure then they wouldn't have imagined they are where they are now, sort of 20 years ago. Her portfolio career and blossomed along the way in similar roles to yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sometimes a bit of a challenging thing to crack, because I would equally agree that, especially in those kind of first stages where you're looking for maybe like exploring lots of different interests or passions, saying yes to lots of different things in that kind of exploratory phase is really important, and part of kind of the learning and development process. But equally, when you've taken on a few different roles, saying yes to more stuff can not just impact on that one role, but for me, when I've kind of taken on a bit too much sometimes, I just also and then left feeling of like a lot of guilt hanging over me the whole time that I'm not delivering. Even if I'm doing okay, the guilt is constantly there, and that does definitely have an impact on my ability to deliver and to enjoy things, which I know I'm passionate about. But if I take on too much sometimes, then I can't enjoy any of them, even though there's lots of great things about each of the different opportunities. So I think it's like it's I guess part of the process is learning what your limit is and what feels comfortable and right for you. And I guess there's a bit of trial and error in that, particularly in the early days of exploring what's the things that you're most interested in and what the things are that you want to take forward.
Which I suppose in many ways is why it's easier often when those early roles aren't necessarily paid roles, and you're doing things you're just interested in, because actually you have just got that freedom to explore with that little bit less of a burden of guilt delivery. I don't know how else to phrase that, but the words you used there were perfect. And I suppose that's certainly makes that initial transition a bit easier. I think whenever you're looking at formal employment with these kind of roles, it's always worth really drilling down to what's expected from you. And when you're having to divide up your time like this, it's very different when you're just doing a kind of 8-session, 9-session salary job, a partner job. You're actually having to drill down to hours of your time, and you've got to be very realistic with yourself about what you can portion to that. If you can't do certain times of the day, sometimes the week, sometimes the evening, you've got to be upfront. Actually, if you can't deliver what they're expecting when it gets to that more formal relationship, it can be a really unsatisfying thing for you professionally as well. GPs, as most medics, we're ingrained to be a little bit perfectionist in one way, or to deliver the highest we can do, which is a great attribute to have, but it does bring that element of guilt back in, as you described, and that's one which I know a lot of people feel.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've kind of touched on something which I'd be interested to hear your views on a couple of times. You said that perhaps in the future you'd like to go back to doing more clinical work. In terms of finding that balance between clinical sessions versus other opportunities and other roles, do you think there's kind of an optimum or a right time to cut down on the number of clinical sessions? I think it's something I get speak to people about a lot, and some people think that they should be doing every clinical session they can under the sun, versus others who are more comfortable doing a few less. What that journey been like for you in terms of balancing clinical versus non-clinical work?
Yeah, so that balance is, as you just asked, individual for me. It's going to be individual for everyone, and if some people can find the capacity to work 9-10 sessions and don't find the same emotional burnout that people do. I'm sorry, Anthony, my connection is dropping a bit, so if I do drop off, we can start this question again. That's a really an excellent question, and I think it's a really difficult one to find your right balance. You can only do it from an experiential learning, if I'm honest. For me, I'm probably swinging to a little bit more than when I always thought I would do. So I do currently 2 days a week clinical with 3 days a week non-clinical. And I always imagined it would be flip the other way around for me, so 3 clinical days. And I thought I'd be a happy medium. I've tried more than that. I've done 5 days a week clinical work. And it didn't take long for me to notice. I'm not ashamed to say that, my health and my longevity and clinical work would have suffered. Clinical work is, by a country mile, is still my most rewarding part of the week. And there is no substitute for it. But it's incredibly emotionally intense and absorbing. And there's no environment like it, really. Breaking my week up and into different sections, almost like different sections of your brain, you do feel very much like you're giving your other clinical space chance to refresh and to recap on what is often a very, very, very intense environment to operate in. So everyone's balance is going to be different. Some people can I don't want to say tolerate, because that sounds like it's a burden, but can certainly operate with more clinical time in their week. And everyone's experience of clinical time is different, because different practices operate in very different ways, and the burden which a GP can take on will change on the workload too. So I think that's another factor to bring in.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's been interesting throughout this that kind of a lot of the process has all been around not having necessarily to set a path, looking for different opportunities, exploring passions. And I guess a part of that is all around networking and seeing what's out there. You're obviously chair of a really important network, being a First5. In terms of that network, is that something that you've seen people be able to engage with to learn more about what's going on locally? And are there any other networks or good advice that you'd give for people who are looking for what is out there, looking to connect with people who are doing things they might be interested in or have shared interests with?
Yeah, so First5 network, absolutely. And at the moment, there's some fantastic First5 representatives covering all the faculties and areas who, encourage you all to get on board with, certainly digitally at the moment anyway. Some are more mature than others at the moment. So some of the First5 groups have been going for longer. I've got digital forums that, so be it WhatsApp or the like, to communicate and work with. And some people are not at that stage yet, and that's just because of the maturity of the First5 faculty. But that's that will change depending on where you are. Other opportunities, just keeping your eye out on the usual recruitment pages, really, actually. So I found a lot of opportunities for me came through things like LinkedIn, and opportunities on Twitter, even RCGP. You've got some fantastic opportunities and roles which they post internally, which people can view on the website. And that's where I started to see what opportunities were available and branch. That's where I encourage people to start, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think LinkedIn is a great place to look for opportunities, and Twitter has been, for me, a really good opportunity to just kind of see what people are doing, to see kind of like some of the bigger players in areas that I might have an interest in. And definitely one of the things that I really enjoyed about when I took some time out during my fellowship was just taking the opportunity to reach out and connect with some of those people. And that's something you could do at any time. I think most people, if you're interested in the work they're doing, everybody loves being flattered. And so if you tell them that you're interested in learning more about what they do, you think they're really interesting, by and large, whenever I've done that, people have given me the opportunity to come and spend some time with them. At the minute, because it's COVID, it's a bit of a different way of doing things. But I think people are very generous with their time in the world of primary care by and large. And if you're interested and looking to learn more, there's lots of people out there who'll be able to support you on that journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't quite mastered the Twitter sphere like you had though, Anthony. I need to work on that, I think.
So I guess in terms of kind of final words, do you have any other top tips for people that are thinking about a portfolio career, how to get started, or any other pitfalls or challenges, things that you've learned along the way that you'd like to share?
Well, I think that one thing that's been wonderful about COVID for general practice in many ways, and this is something which the First5 have been feeding in a lot to, First5 committee have been feeding a lot to into the college, really. It's about the benefits about flexibility and flexible working, and general practice historically has not been the most flexible career option in terms of, certainly at our stage in the career, with either portfolio careers or commitments at home to families, to partners. And I think that is now opening up. So you're seeing more and more flexible roles come on, flexible clinical roles coming on. And I think a lot of people who might have gone into more portfolio careers before were doing so because they couldn't necessarily make some of their clinical commitments to fit around their flexible working. That's changing, but that's changing, and that will benefit both portfolio careers and non-portfolio careers, the more traditional careers. So I think we might see more of a balance between what people are taking on. One of the real big advantages for portfolio career is being able to embrace flexible working. And even now in a clinical world, my practice is understanding if I'm having to work from home because of isolation, I can work around the hours that suit the children, but I couldn't do that before. And the portfolio career really offered that for me in my non-clinical roles, that there were times of day which I really couldn't work in. And it meant that I wasn't being removed from that part of the profession, which was part of the problem, I think, before with clinical work.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important reflection. And one of the other conversations that we've done as part of this series was around GP at scale, and another one was obviously around things like primary care networks. And actually, like when we were having those conversations, lots of practices are moving to a place where they're offering more under one roof. So you might be able to build like a portfolio within a practice, so you don't necessarily have to look beyond that. But whether it's a special clinical interest or taking on additional roles within your practice, there's lots of scope and increasing scope for being able to work flexibly across different roles within one environment as well. Or if you're in like a super practice across multiple sites, doing that across a wider area as well. So I think that's another really interesting thing to look out for, and there's always new opportunities developing because of some of those kind of like bigger picture system level changes as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that's been really helpful for me as I come towards the end of my training as well, just to kind of talk through a few things and think through a few things. I hope everybody that watching has found this really useful and interesting as well. Thank you, Ian, for taking the time to talk with us. And yeah, any kind of final words that you'd like to say about why you really enjoy a portfolio career?
For me, it's an opportunity to take these clinical skills that we've been working on building for so long and apply them to other domains, because they're certainly incredibly helpful skills that many other markets, industries that benefit from. So that's one of the richest parts.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks again, Ian, for your time. And we'll see you again for another one of these classes very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anthony.